a debate between the candidates for the 40th Legislative District State Senator. And there are two candidates on your ballot for this race, and they are candidates Elizabeth or Liz Lovelett and Daniel Miller. Here's an office description. The Washington State Senate is made up of 49 members, one from each legislative district in the state. 1/2 of the membership of the Senate is elected at the general election, held in November of each even-numbered year. During legislative sessions, the legislature is called upon to enact or reject legislation affecting public policy in the state, provide for the levy and collection of taxes and other revenue to support state government and assist local government, and appropriate funds for these purposes. The Senate also has the exclusive power to confirm certain gubernatorial appointments. Although laws are enacted only when the legislature is convened in formal session, policy issues and the general operation of state and local government are under continuous review by legislators serving on permanent and interim study committees. Washington State Senators serve 4-year terms, and their annual salary is $52,766. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes each for the opening statements, and they will have 1 minute to respond to each question and will make a 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate has a challenge card. Can you hold those up? Okay, thanks. And they may use this card to challenge or rebut their opponent's response. The challenging candidate will have 45 seconds to state the challenge, and the opponent will have 45 seconds to respond. Each candidate may use a challenge card just one time. Carol Como and Michelle Kopchka. This is Sherry Nelson, sorry, we got rotating chairs here today, are tracking the time, and thank heavens they are. Timers will flash a yellow sign when 15 seconds remain, the yellow sign, and then the red sign when to signal time is up. If a candidate continues, a bell will be rung to signal stop talking. We ask that the candidates be respectful of the time allotted due to the limited amount of time that we have and our desire to include as many questions as possible. An important goal of the league is civil discussion. To that end, we also ask that those in the audience be respectful and refrain from comments, as well as hold their applause until the conclusion of the debate. Some questions were prepared by our league question committee. We encourage members of the audience to provide written questions which should be addressed to all candidates. Ushers are available in the back, and they'll pick them up and then take your questions to the screeners. So just hold them up if you have one. Questions will be screened by Heather McKay-Brown and Julie. And sorry, Julie, I don't know your last name. They will be screening for legibility and clarity and to avoid duplication. Each candidate will be asked to respond to the same question during the debate portion. And for this debate, the candidates rolled a dice, and the high roller had the choice of going first with their opening statement or having the last closing statement. And so candidate Lovelett will go first, and then after we start, I will alternate which candidate speaks first as I ask the question. So those are the rules. Are we ready, timers? Okay. So, candidate Lovelett, let's hear your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the League for hosting today. I'm always impressed with your forums. I'm Liz Lovelett. I'm the current senator for the 40th District. I was appointed in February to fulfill the remainder of this session. So I got there 6 days before policy cutoff, and I sponsored 6 pieces of legislation of my own and co-sponsored 29 total pieces of legislation. I'm in my 6th year of public service. I had just started almost 2 years into my 2nd term on the Anacortes City Council when I was appointed to the legislature. So I was very pleased when I got to Olympia to find that my experiences in local governance around public works and infrastructure, public safety, housing, really just were very useful to apply at the state level, just on a broader scale. So it's been really invigorating to be in Olympia. I really worked hard to create strong relationships, not only in my own caucus, but also across the aisle, and all of my bills had bipartisan support. So in the time that I've worked in the legislature, I've worked on ORCA recovery, on environmental bills, on issues around eviction reform and homelessness prevention, and fully funding our education system to its greatest potential. So there's lots more work to be done as we move into the next year and the next session. We have to work on reforming our tax code. We know that we still have a lot of people who are struggling and in need, vulnerable community members. We have an immigrant population that really needs support and help and their safety recognized, and I'm looking forward to getting into all of it. I currently serve on the Transportation and Local Government Committee, and I'll be picking up another one in January as well. So I love what I do. I've always been a policy wonk. My background is actually in small business. I owned a record store in Anacortes, so not your traditional start to politics, but I really love what I do. So look forward to earning your vote.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
So I'm Daniel Miller, and so I came over here last night from Friday Harbor, but I still got about 5 o'clock this morning because I thought I was going to be on prime time at 9:30 this morning, like a couple weeks ago or months ago. So it's kind of pleasant to know that I'm here in late afternoon. Famous at last. This is great. A great place to have the forum. I thank the Women's League of Voters for having it here. For one thing, it's kind of cozy, kind of warm. It's just a nice ambiance here. So Daniel Miller, running for state senator in the 40th district. I had a very popular antique store in Friday Harbor, New England Collectibles. That was fantastic. And I still operate in the antique trades a little bit, plus I do landscaping. If I get elected, I want to serve on the Finance Committee, the Law and Justice Committee, and the Ecology Committee. I think there's an Ecology Committee. Some things I'm concerned about are transportation, working for jobs in a good local economy, maintaining freedom and liberty, careful spending, educational policy, and water rights and property rights. And I really would like some good questions today. I would love to entertain a question about the jail, even though I don't really want to get involved in the Whatcom County jail or the sheriff's race. I think that's a really important question that I would like to entertain today. Some things I worked on while, just kind of civic things where I was involved with community theater, Relay for Life, where I helped raise money for cancer, community dinners, and let me tell you, the Thanksgiving dinner was fantastic. And I just look forward to your questions. Taxes are a big part of my campaign, believe it or not, and I've got something exciting to announce about taxes, as a matter of fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, this is your first question. Mm-hmm. What qualities do you possess that differentiate you from your opponent in being an effective representative for this district?
Well, I don't really want to speak for my opponent. I don't, know the difference totally. I mean, I'll just say what I have. I have good research skills, educational skills, building coalitions, public policy skills, public relations skills. I believe that I can work with I do actually work with a variety of people, from left wing to right wing, and in between, musicians, theater, policy wonks, law enforcement, business. So I believe I could build a good coalition, and I'm willing to work across the aisle and willing to compromise. But there's some things I don't want to compromise on. For example, a state income tax. I will not compromise on that. I will vote against that for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett.
Thank you. I think what some of the characteristics that set me apart are the experiences that I've had around planning and public policy. So I have spent the last 5 years working on issues around the just transition, so making sure that as we create our new energy future, we are bringing people along and making sure to not leave industries behind, communities behind. Additionally, on my time in the Anacortes City Council, we saw a real desperate need in our community to create planning around affordable housing and community resources. So I formed a new council committee and spent the next couple of years drilling down on the issues specific to Anacortes about how we can create a platform for more affordable housing to be created. So these experiences that I've had in community planning have been incredibly helpful. I also think that I really capture a lot of the spirit of the 40th District. I come from limited means myself, and I think that is underrepresented pretty dramatically in the legislature, understanding what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. And I think that these are skills that I will be able to use in my legislative policy.
Thank you. This next one is sort of a continuation because I think we're kind of going back and forth, so I'm going to let you just continue. What experiences and characteristics make you the most effective candidate for this position? Candidate Lovelett.
Thank you. So I understand in this, in the business of governance, your relationships are really key to being effective in your position. So, like I said, I've not only spent time working with my own caucus and earning their support and respect, but also working across the aisle and then across public offices all around. Additionally, it's you guys that make me effective in my job. So in my office this year, the way I organized it was constituent communication was primary. I wanted to make sure that I was hearing from people about the legislation that affects you guys on the day-to-day. So I think that that ability to be available and to listen, and you can't make everybody happy all the time, but it's really incredibly important to bring people to the table and hear about what their concerns are. So using those relationships as a foundation to build strong public policy that has a net benefit for people and environment.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
Okay, yes, I do agree with bringing people together. And if I do get elected, I want to have several hearings with citizens, academia, and medical providers. And I like to talk about I like it if you ask a question about what hearings I'm talking about, too. That'd be fantastic. I am a Republican, but when I was at Evergreen State College, by the way, I also went to the UW, too, where I studied legal studies, and at the Evergreen State College, I studied public policy. So I'm a Republican, but at the Evergreen State College, I studied Washington State government with Senator Karen Frazier, D. Olympia. And she was a fantastic teacher, and we got along really well. And there were some people in the class that, didn't like my ideas, but Karen Frazier said, why don't we just listen to all these ideas and talk about them? So I have good skills, good coalition building skills. My research skills are important. I think good research is important. Thank you.
Thank you. And last kind of general question, Candidate Miller, if elected, what legislation would you make a personal priority to pass because you believe it would most benefit the people of your district, and why do you choose it?
I mean, I can't choose just one piece of legislation. I do want to make sure that, one important piece of legislation would be, I want to talk about taxes today, but there's so much money hidden in state government investments. I would like to actually do a tax rebate for everybody in Washington State in December of 2020, where everyone would get a certain check. I want to check out the possibility of that. I'm opposed to a state income tax. I'm opposed to the jail tax here in Whatcom County. I'm opposed to any new taxes next year in 2020 or 2019. So anyways, Governor Inslee and his crew has already said the budget is rosy, and the rainy day fund has like $3 billion, but there's a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett.
Thanks. So one of the main things that I have heard back from constituents as I've gone around the district this interim is that there were several of our school districts, particularly in the San Juan Islands, that were left behind with the levy fix that we did the end of last session. So my plan is to run several bills to try to meet that gap. For example, out in the San Juan Islands, they were able to collect closer to around $4,100 per student, and with the levy stabilization bill, now they're only allowed to get $2,500. So they are left with some severe deficits sits in their budget. So that's one of the main things that needs to be carried for next year. Additionally, I'm very keen on electrifying our ferry system. We have some incredible examples around the world of how we can do that. The technology has become much cheaper and more readily available so that we can start working on that effort here at home. Additionally, I will continue to support pathways to universal health care. We know that health care is a fundamental human right, and it is gives basic dignity to everyone in our community. So I'll continue to fight for that and for reforming our DSHS application process.
Thank you. Now we're going to start getting a little bit more specific, and we're going to talk about gun ownership, and we'll start with you, Ms. Candidate Lovelett. What is your position on the Second Amendment and the gun violence that we are experiencing across the country? Do you believe the legislature has a role in reducing gun violence, and what should that role be?
So one of the big parts of the Second Amendment is talking about having a well-regulated militia, and I think we've really lost sight of there being regulatory authority over that. I think there should be no issues around having licensure. I don't think there should be any issues around having safety training, gun locks, things like that. There's a lot of common sense ways that we can broach this issue without taking away guns from law-abiding citizens. We clearly have an issue. I have children in elementary school, and the fact that this is a drill I didn't have to do when I was a kid, but they have to have basically the bad man drill. What happens if somebody comes into their school and starts shooting? That is a very, very stark reality for parents out there and for everybody who has concerns around the safety of our kids in our schools. So I think that the steps we can take in the legislature to make sure that people who, for example, have a history of violent behavior or incarceration with violent behavior don't have access to firearms. I think there's some ways that we can look at this issue that, again, they don't take guns away from law-abiding citizens, but do put some sideboards on it.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
That's true. There are some people that shouldn't be anywhere near a gun. But I don't want to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens either, and I support the Second Amendment. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and a strong supporter of the First Amendment. And there seems to be an attack. A lot of it's coming from Washington, D.C., groups, not just government officials, but groups in Washington, D.C. and Olympia that are attacking our First Amendment and our Second Amendment. And there seems to be some interesting things going on in our country. And you got a lot of it has to do with land use. And so there's a lot of things happening with land use, First Amendment, Second Amendment, and which I want to talk about. But I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, sorry. If you had a magic wand, what would you do to protect our citizens, particularly our children, from gun violence?
Well, if I had a magic wand, if I was a wizard, I would make sure there was no shootings at schools, and there was no hunting accidents. So yeah, if I could just flash a magic wand, I would eliminate all school shootings, of course. Is that your question?
Kind of whatever you want to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Candidate Lovelett.
So I think there's some paths forward on this. One, if I had a magic wand, I'd get rid of white supremacy and domestic terrorist groups. They are clearly having a very broad effect in our communities, and I think some of the recent shootings that we've seen that are absolutely racially motivated, that we would eliminate and keep a watch on those. Additionally, I think we would be wise to invest in suicide prevention. A lot of the gun injuries that we have in our country are people inflicting it on themselves. And when we see that happening more and more to our children, making sure that they have the social support networks that they need in order to avoid that altogether. Additionally, if I had my magic wand, I would stop having a market for military-grade weapons in the hands of civilians.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett, do you support vaccines being required for school attendance? Explain why or why not.
Vaccines are fundamental to public health, and this is an issue that's come up time and again because of a vote from earlier in this session for me. So my kids are vaccinated, I'm vaccinated. definitely believe in it for public health. We do have some work to do on clarifying medical exemptions for kids that maybe don't have an autoimmune disorder, but definitely have a family history of having injuries from vaccines. But yes, we have to make sure that kids are vaccinated to be in public school. It's a public service that the taxpayers fund, and we need to protect the kids that are unable to have those vaccines.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
So I too am vaccinated. I've got 4, nieces and nephews that are vaccinated. But this is very tricky. Some people have approached me and they're really bothered about the religious exemption being removed. And also the vaccination, the companies that make the vaccination products should be held accountable, should they not, if a lot of people are getting sick. So I support vaccinations, but there are problems with vaccinations, and some people don't even know this was a thing. I didn't know this was even a thing till a couple of years ago, but you can't really sue vaccination companies. They've put mercury and different temesirol in some vaccines. So we need to do more research on vaccines and vaccinations, and we should keep the religious exemption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Miller, what do you think are the best opportunities for economic development and job creation in your district?
Well, keeping taxes down. Of course, we need some regulations, no doubt, but eliminating unnecessary regulations, keeping taxes down, promoting products, promoting agricultural products. I'm not running for president, so I can't really negotiate NAFTA, or TPP, although I was against NAFTA and against TPP, and I support renegotiating NAFTA. But in our community, just keeping taxes down, unnecessary regulations is a great way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett.
I think we have a really profound opportunity in the 40th District to look at our energy sector and figure out how to transition it into the future. So whether that's co-locating clean tech companies, alternative energy companies around our existing refineries and industrial areas, to try to move those issues forward. We also have an incredible maritime sector here. So we have deep water ports in a couple of different places. We have an incredibly well-trained workforce that can do everything from shipbuilding to finish work and carpentry, and really supporting those industries and make sure that those jobs are there for people into the future. And with that, we need to make sure that we're supporting our CTC programs, community and technical programs, apprenticeship programs, to be training the workforce of the future to take on those positions. We additionally could use some B&O reform.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett, are there specific things that you can do as a state legislator to address the needs of the chronically unemployed or underemployed?
Well, we have some real issues in our country around the way people get educated. So we have a very one-size-fits-all path for kids that maybe are not going to go into a four-year college. They could use a different track to move into a future that makes sense for them. I mean, ultimately, when people don't have jobs that have a living wage, then we're putting them in a position to be in chronic poverty and, even worse, in a position to be homeless. So I think the more that we can provide diverse housing options, the more that we can work on preventing homelessness in the first place, and the more that we can create a living wage and a minimum wage that actually is commensurate with the cost of living, those are all ways that we support people who have issues finding employment.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
Could you repeat the question again?
Mm-hmm. Are there specific things that you can do as a state legislator to address the needs of the chronically unemployed or underemployed?
Well, like Liz said, the education is a good place to start. So like a lot of times they have one size fits all, of course, and then they have the outcome-based education. And they made it so it was too rigorous for some people to graduate from high school. There's actually 7 intelligences, and that's not really addressed in schools very much. Some people are great at music, Some people are great at drama. Some people are great at math. Some people are great at building construction projects. So I think we need to incorporate the 7 intelligences a little bit more in our educational system. And then we can also provide, training for people that are chronically unemployed. And then, of course, homeless, that's a whole topic. I've talked to homeless people. I know homeless people. And some homeless people are good people. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, do you support the extension of the Canadian Trans Mountain Pipeline to Cherry Point and south through Whatcom County? Why or why not?
I mean, let's put it this way. I'm not up here in Whatcom a lot, but I support the free flow of oil. We need it for society, but I also want oil to be safe, and I don't want oil spills, so we need to just make sure oil flows freely, and do regulations maybe that to make sure that we don't have accidents. But until we transition to a fully electric society, then we still need to have oil. As a matter of fact, I just thought about this. When I was in college, Evergreen State College, I studied economics with this great professor who was advocating removing the oil from our society. And I said, fine, if you got to remove it, you need to keep it fully functional until you move, go to an electric-based society. So I support oil at Cherry Point. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett?
My office sent a letter to Justin Trudeau's cabinet opposing the Keystone Pipeline. And the reason is because we need to start divesting from new fossil fuel infrastructure investments and start putting that into other places. I agree. We don't have a real strategy for transportation fuels for long distances. And as we work on electrifying our personal cars and our transportation systems, that need will be less and less over time. And we need to have our economy and our workforce insulated against those changes. Additionally, with that project, we were really looking at cumulative vessel impact for what that would do for our surrounding waterways. We have pretty weak reciprocity in terms of spill response between Canada and the United States in the Salish Sea, and we're also woefully underprepared to respond to tar sands spills.
Thank you. Many people believe human-caused climate change is happening now. What is the significance of climate change, and what, if any, legislation do you support to mitigate climate change? Candidate Lovelett.
Any of it, all of it, climate change is absolutely real. I have been working on this since I was 7 years old and first heard about the hole in the ozone layer. We have to work on our products. We need to work on our consumerism. We need to work on our packaging. We need to work on our individual impact. We need to invest in multimodal transportation and alternative ways for people to get from here to there. We have to work in our air quality. I love the idea of Sapal Setu, let's plant 1 million more trees. The reality is there's not going to be a silver bullet that's going to save us from climate change. It's going to take a whole lot of effort by every single person, every agency to find a path forward so we can save our planet. We've spent far too long polluting where we eat, and now we're in a situation where we have to do very immediate, very strong damage control on what's happened so far.
Candidate Miller.
So you had to ask that question. So I just want to read something really quick. The Puget Sound Regional Council Board and staff are working diligently to develop plans for a working sustainable future in preparation for accepting almost 2 million people to the region in the next 30 years. The Vision 2050 document will balance fiscal sustainability, climate change concerns, and affordable housing. And so, of course, 2020 came out of 2030, 2030 came out of Agenda 21. And what's happened is they're trying to take away property rights, water rights, in the name of the environment. I have to say, because of my educational background and how I went to Los Angeles and went to a conference on geoengineering and chemtrailing, that honestly, climate change is, most of it's a hoax. Of course, the frequency of the planet is changing. Maybe this change is happening. But what the government says is happening is a hoax. Thank you.
Candidate Miller, what role, if any, is there for tax reform in building a vibrant state economy? Please explain.
Okay. What's the path forward to a vibrant state economy?
Is there a role for tax reform in building a vibrant state economy?
Right. There is a role in tax reform. Like Liz was talked about earlier, property tax reform, that's a good start. Keeping taxes low, that's a good way to go. I oppose a capital gains income tax. I oppose a state income tax. There's a lot of money. The state says that the economic outlook is rosy, and the rainy day fund has $3 billion. The problem is, in the investments, they've got billions and billions. They're hoarding billions and billions. They actually invest money in Hong Kong real estate, $650 million. That's just one investment. We're being lied to, and it's a big shell game. And I've talked to lobbyists about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lovelett.
We all know that in Washington State we have one of the most regressive tax codes of anywhere in the United States, and we have our most vulnerable people least able to pay the tax burden that they have. And I think in particular this hits lower income families and seniors the hardest. So we know that we have to take a look at this and figure out a path forward. There was a recent Supreme Court case that kind of opened the door a little bit on the concept of an income tax, but that's a big uphill battle in the legislature because it requires 2/3 majority in both chambers in order to pass that, since it's constitutionally enshrined. But I'm supportive of an income tax. Most other states have it, and it doesn't eliminate commerce or wreck your economy. As I mentioned before, I do think we need B&O reform to help our small businesses thrive. I am absolutely supportive of a capital gains tax, and as Mr. Miller was alluding to, something like the creation of a state bank in order to protect our investments for our rainy day fund would be a way to keep that interest income back in the state.
Thank you. Okay, this is your last question. The state, and we're going to start with candidate Lovelett. The state recently passed legislation preventing employers from asking about criminal convictions on job applications. Because of the discriminatory effect of these questions, what other measures can or should the state adopt to ensure the applicant pools for jobs in our district ensure equity in the process?
Well, we also passed another bill that had to do with not being able to have a person who is offering a job ask the candidate what their past salary was. And that was specifically to protect women, because women tend to get paid less for the same job. So when you ask, okay, how much did you make this last job? And now you have someone that's going to match that salary rather than what they would have offered to somebody else. I think these are the ways that we head-on deal with the discrimination in our workplace. I mean, as you can imagine, based on the rate that we incarcerate people of color in this state, and we do have for-profit prisons in our state, I think it's incredibly important to remove that barrier to employment, especially if one of our net goals is to start to reduce recidivism, homelessness, and the commensurate cost that comes with keeping people underemployed. So I'm supportive of measures to help continue to strengthen that for people.
Thank you.
So if you could I just want to get the details. The devil's in the details. So if you could repeat it one more time.
Sure. The state recently passed legislation preventing employers from asking about criminal convictions on job applications because of the discriminatory effect of these questions. What other measures can or should the state adopt to ensure the applicant pools for jobs in our district ensure equity in the process? Okay,
I'll address that, but I do need to, since this is the last question, I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but sometimes it'd be good maybe if you do a forum where you had like 3 minutes or 4 minutes, because I don't find I get enough time to answer the questions. It's pretty complex sometimes. And anyways, so like Liz, I do support reducing the barriers to employment. If someone's went to prison, they served their time, they should be able to get out, get a job. Some people, You know, they've been to prison, they become a preacher. They've been to prison, they become a country singer. They've been to prison, they become a movie star. Just because you've been to prison doesn't mean you're a bad person. So we should find ways to reduce barriers and make sure people have living wage jobs and a great outlook for their life and the state of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our closing statements. And Candidate Lovelett, you're going to go first.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming out on a Saturday afternoon to participate in democracy and really hear about what the candidates have to offer and the differences that we strike in our policy positions. So I just want to reiterate that I love what I do. I think that my experiences and my ability to listen and build coalitions and relationships is going to be incredibly helpful moving forward. It's a really interesting place to work, and we have a lot of constraints that we put on people who are running for office around wanting them to be perfect and wanting them to take every vote exactly the way we want to. And I can't promise either of those things, but I can promise to always be available, to always listen, to be authentic, and to be here to listen to your needs and do my very best to represent the people of the 40th District.
Thank you. Candidate Miller.
So once again, I want to thank the Women's League of Voters. It's always nice to hear Liz Lovelett's perspective. I'd like to hear different people's ideas, and that's really important. And if I get to Olympia, I will, my office will be open. I want to have hearings on the homelessness, hearings on the possible correlation between medicines and some medicines and Alzheimer's, disappearances of individuals at national parks, taxes, water, education, elderly issues, and child care issues. Well, Liz Lovelett is a very hard worker. I think I provide a perspective that is needed in this time. This reminds me of watching the History Channel. This is kind of the time of, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming, spending your Saturday with us, and appreciate your stepping up and running. Thank you.